All right, thanks, Nick. Yeah, it's great to see everyone. Thanks a lot for staying, and I'm really glad to present this relatively new paper of mine, Search Information Friction on the Global E-commerce Platform. This is definitely a super relevant audience for us. It's crossover with Jie Bai, Maggie Chen, Jin Liu, and Xiaosheng. I believe maybe all of them are in the chat box. So if you have any questions, feel free to type in any question. They will be able to just reply to your question in real time. So the possibly doesn't need too much motivation. Also by Ginger's work already show that the retail e-commerce sales has really grown tremendously. And last year the global retail e-commerce grew by almost 30%, and now we look around the world, around 18% of the total retail being accounted for by the e-commerce. But potentially a relatively less known fact is that actually, despite it started from a very low starting point, the cross-border e-commerce sales are actually growing even faster than the kind of within-border e-commerce. In fact, in last year alone, around 70% of online buyers have actually completed a cross-border transaction. And with that background, a lot of the developing countries generally, they basically think, maybe the developing country should not only be the consumer, but also being an active player and be the producer in this whole digital economy. This kind of like motive being also fairly well supported by some kind of like fairly eye-catching slogan by the prominent like global e-commerce platforms like AliExpress, the one we'll be studying. Essentially, they were saying that set up your e-commerce store in a flash. It's easy and free, and millions of shoppers are waiting to visit your store. Right? Sounds like a big promise for a lot of SMEs in these developing countries. Promising them very low entry barriers compared to the traditional offline exporting, and for them to access a very, very big global market. And not surprisingly, given this kind of like rosy picture, you can see there are a lot of policy initiatives, generated by the government around the world, try to support their SMEs, in particular at the onboarding stage. Since this is an I/O conference, mostly thinking about the Asian Pacific region, I basically did just very brief like online research, and then immediately you find like in the region, for instance, in developed countries like Singapore and Australia, and also in way more developing countries like Indonesia and Vietnam, across all these broad range of countries, you can see most of the government already have these programs in place, and they take the form of financial assistance, training, as well as like getting you connected to very prominent world platforms like Alibaba or Amazon. But let me emphasize this: a lot of them basically just like focus on initial onboarding stage, and given these kind of big effort, our paper is kind of going to serve as a more like cautionary tale, because a lot of the works, including the crowd in this specific audience, have actually really worked a lot to think about these cross-border e-commerce platforms. Also have pretty well-known challenges. Two types of these challenges. One type is to think about the lower entry barriers and fixed operating costs. Actually means that there's a proliferation of sellers could be competing for the limited attention of the consumers. Typically, we label as like search friction, or maybe limited awareness of these consumers. And on top of that, since these trades are mostly cross-border, and these cross-border differences in language, culture, and business practices tend to also exacerbate typical difficulty in assess the foreign firms' intrinsic quality, which we typically label as information frictions. And combined, they interact with each other, could also hinder the growth of the high-quality firms, lead to misallocation and welfare losses. Our work is going to add on these existing papers by considering, motivated by these very pervasive onboarding initiatives, and we're going to investigate both theoretically and quantitatively how the rising number of market participants, in fact, interact these online market frictions, and what are their welfare implications. Okay, so as I already mentioned, the paper will be set at the background of AliExpress, which is possibly one of the largest global B2C cross-border e-commerce platform. And in addition to the standard comprehensive platform data, we also try to mingle in our own pretty novel, rich quality measures that are collected through our real purchases and interaction with these sellers. And we're going to achieve our research goal in 4 steps. In the first step, we're going to document some facts that is consistent with online frictions, and also its potential undoing. documented by a lot of earlier works. Okay, so basically using our self-collected quality measures, we're going to show that on the AliExpress platform, actually there's pretty big scope for potential mislocation, meaning that the market leaders are not necessarily the highest quality folks. And then, we're going to also document this very important demand reinforcement mechanism, which not only exists on AliExpress, but also on a lot of other platforms, showing that, once the sellers start to accumulate sales, and the platform will allow them to increase their visibility and increase the speed of the arrival for their future sales. This does create a potential room for these sellers to overcome the search and the information frictions. However, we're going to experimentally quantify the magnitude of this demand reinforcement mechanism, and we're going to show you that this reinforcement mechanism does play a role, but it plays a small role in the sense that the magnitude is relatively small to help these sellers. Then we're going to theoretically examine, in such a platform with a large number of sellers, exactly how the number of sellers interact with these online market frictions. And we find that, in fact, a larger N could worsen the allocation and the welfare on this platform. And the specific theoretical channel is exactly through the weakening of this demand reinforcement mechanism that we actually documented. And putting all these pieces together, and finally, we're going to estimate a rich empirical model that incorporates all these pieces and try to talk a little bit more about what are the potential policy counterfactual that could facilitate the growth of the promising high-quality businesses and further alleviate these frictions. Okay, so this is kind of a brief roadmap. Of course, this is related to a very large set of literature. This is also, as I always say, this is a partial list and it's been growing. It's related to a large literature in search and information friction, both international trade and also international industry organization. And even, as I said, even this year on the job market, I've already seen like 6 platform design papers. So definitely this list has been growing longer and longer these days. And also we're really glad, Michael's here discussing our paper, because this obviously related to Michael's earlier work about the platform design in the setting of in the e-commerce setting. And also, I want to point out that our work is also particularly related to another paper by Akin, Kendall, and Osman, where they also conducted a randomized control trial from the demand side and try to look at whether that could help the SMEs in the country access the global market. But while the Akin, Kendall, and Osman's paper mostly focus on the exporters' own response in terms of learning by doing and improve their quality, our focus is more coming from the elevation of the market frictions coming from the demand side. Okay, so without further delay, let me just briefly tell you what kind of data we use, and then jump into the stylized facts. Okay, as I said, we are going to focus on this platform of AliExpress. This platform started in the year 2010 and has been growing very rapidly. It has around 1.1 million active sellers and conduct almost more than 200 million monthly visits. And we're only going to be able to focus on a relatively small segment of this platform, which is the children's t-shirt. And it sells around 10,000 product listings in our study. And we're going to focus on these 10,000 product listings in our empirical analysis, in particular the stylized facts. In addition to a lot of the standard platform data that you have all used and seen, which are, would include the cumulative orders, price discounts rating of each of these and detailed product specification of each of these listings, as well as the order and review history of these listings for a certain period of time. We want to emphasize that here we also conduct our own homework, which is trying to get a little bit more in terms of how good each of these seller and listings qualities are. So we actually self-collected the quality measures along multiple dimensions. In particular, we use the direct communication with the seller to actually document their service qualities. We conduct real purchases, and through there, we actually take down the date of purchase, the shipment and delivery, to kind of record the seller's shipping qualities. And on top of that, we also use a third-party rating agency to help us to pin down the product quality of these product listings. in specific settings, obviously the children's T-shirt. Okay, so just in case you'll be curious, what these product quality dimension look like. They include around 8 different categories, and broadly, we can think about them are the quality related to fabric materials, the quality related to the seams, and the quality related to the patterns and also the printings. And for each of these specific category, we'll ask our professional rating agents to kind of give us a specific grade, and then later we're going to standardize all these quality dimensions into a standardized 0-1 normal distribution, and so such that we can compare them across different sellers. Okay. All right, so here are a few examples. Due to time limit, maybe I can only just give an example about this lower left one, which possibly going to motivate our next slides, which is here, as you can see, despite the fact that sometimes when even the products look very similar, they might look, of identical design, there's still non-trivial quality differences within these certain variety groups, right? So that makes the ex-ante kind of like, design of the study, and I suppose we can check the quality of these products to be particularly important for us to understand, how good each seller's product listings are. Another unique feature of AliExpress, which is going to help our study, is that AliExpress allows to group listings into so-called varieties. And the definition of variety is exactly a specific product of seemingly identical product design. For instance, on the screen, I'm basically showing you a children's T-shirt. They all coming from different sellers, right? We call them different listings. But each of the T-shirts, on picture, they look identical to the potential customers. And from there, we can conduct certain stylized facts and try to document the potential room for the search and information frictions. Okay, so from there, let me show you 3 stylized facts to motivate our studies. The first fact is relatively standard. Consider a specific product group, just like what I'm showing you on the screen. Okay, we're gonna take the seller who sold the most in this specific variety group, and we call these sellers superstars. And if everything looks observationally equivalent, right, and if there's no other frictions, and obviously we'll know that consumer will pick the best one. So the superstar, just like the standard when we search friction literature, when people are thinking about price dispersion, here we're thinking about market share dispersion. So the fact that the superstar firms within these identical looking product categories do not have a winner takes all, often they account for around 60% of the overall market share, indicates, there could be some existence of frictions within these product categories. In fact, when we look at even the top 25% of the seller listings within these identical looking product varieties, they account for around 90% of the overall market share. Then the natural question is, the superstar firm, indeed, they sell a lot, are they really the highest quality firms? Because we did our own data collection, we can answer that question. So now in this second fact, what we're going to be doing is that we'll be comparing the quality of the group superstar with the seemingly unsuccessful firms, who has sold very little. These are the firms who actually either have sold 0 or less than 5 T-shirts within that specific product group. We're going to take their differences and to see, whether the superstar is always better. And turns out the picture is super noisy, right? So you can see here the difference of superstars quality versus the less successful ones are almost like a symmetric distribution. It's a little bit right skewed, but it's almost kind of centered around 0. So the quality comparison of these two groups also indicating that there could be a potential misallocation on this market, meaning that the highest quality firm did not really get the room to grow, right? The superstar do not necessarily have the highest quality. It is also consistent with the existence of pretty severe information friction on this specific online platform. And the final one is related to the demand reinforcement mechanism we want to establish to think about this might be promising to undo some of these frictions, right? So here, what we're thinking about is that how long it takes for these sellers to actually be discovered by the consumer and to make their first sales. In fact, when you look at here, the pattern is fairly dramatic. On average, it takes around 70 days for the sellers to jump from cumulative order 0 to 1, meaning that it takes 70 days for the first order to arrive. But after this first order, it turns out that the rest of the order arrives much faster. For instance, goes from 1 to 2, right? You can see that they got substantially shortened to be around 20 days, and then this curve just getting way more flatter than the role played by the initial order. So this kind of like demand reinforcement mechanism, which meaning that when you start to accumulate sales, that will improve your visibility on this platform, and then make it much easier for you to sell your future sales. Creates potential for a high-quality supplier to gradually standing out from the rest of other sellers. But just look at this descriptive statistics, stylus facts here. Of course, one empirical challenge is that we do not really know whether this is, indeed this demand reinforcement mechanism being helping them, or just because there's some unobserved seller effort. So to both establish the causality as well as to evaluate the importance quantitatively of this demand reinforcement mechanism, we will actually conduct our own randomized control trials. Okay, so in this experimental setting, because today I'm giving a very short talk, so let me just be relatively brief in terms of the experimental design. So what we're showing you here is that we have a study sample of 133 varieties. Varieties meaning that these are the identical looking products. Okay, and within them we have around 1,200 product listings. Okay, and we are going to pick 784 small listings. They are all smaller or equal to 5 orders. Those are the promising small sellers. We want to observe their growth trajectory after our treatment. Okay, so we're gonna pick these 784 small listings, and these all randomized, and they're also stratified by these product groups. Okay, so we're gonna pick these 784 of them and put them into 3 groups. One group is straightforward; these are control group, and in the T1, in the treatment group 1, we're gonna make 1 order. We're gonna purchase 1 children's T-shirt from this group, and then we're gonna just put a simple star rating, very much just like any standard buyers. In this T2, we're going to make 1 order, and then we're going to put a star rating, and also we're going to put a review. Okay, so essentially, the T1 is going to help us to think about whether the additional purchase and this demand side intervention, this reinforcement channel, could actually overcome the search friction. And putting the review also allows to think a little bit more about whether we can also further alleviate the information friction in this setting. Okay, so we conduct a lot of the standard balance check and everything, but let me just directly jump into the results. So here, this is the impact of our treatment on the subsequent weekly orders of these listings. Okay, across most of the specifications by include week fixed effect, by include group fixed effect, we all find there's a fairly robust but small effect of this initial order generated by us onto the future sales, by these listings from, of course, the other, future consumers. And we can also see, this finding is relatively salient, across English-speaking countries and also the United States, where we actually conducted our purchase. Unfortunately, there's not really a separate impact coming from the giving the review. So our treatment group 1 and 2 give us very similar magnitude. In other words, the insignificant impact of the reviews, which might indicating that just purely because the review being interpreted with containing a lot of noise by the subsequent consumers, or maybe just only because the review only matters when the products were discovered by the consumers, and because of the search friction were already pretty severe, that it's very hard for the review itself to actually play an additional role here.
Daniel?
Yeah.
What kind of a star or review are you giving for this product?
What kind of star?
Or review? Are you
The review,
positive?
Here you could hear a few details, like there's the review. Basically, what we did is we did pretty standardized reviews because we used the latent dirichlet allocation topic model. Try to do some learning about the standard reviews, and then we harvest all the standard keywords and we put them into 3 versions of these reviews, and then we will try to based on the basic quality we've been obtaining, we're giving them 1 version of these reviews in a more standardized way. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. So it's not based on the product that you actually purchase as evaluated by your own evaluator. You tend to give generally positive review regardless of the product.
That's that's true. We can only differ based on how positive we are, but we are not, because of we face certain constraint coming from the IRB restrictions. We cannot really just leave like negative reviews to hurt the sellers. So we're kind of gets our hands tied a little bit on that dimension. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. And also if we think about the general long run magnitude of this treatment, when we were thinking about the end line, which is 13 weeks from our initial treatment, and think about the cumulative amount of orders each of these listings have obtained, this number ranges from 0.1, looking at all destinations, to 0.25. Okay, and one key takeaway here is that the reinforcement mechanism does have a small but robust impact to overcome these frictions. On the other hand, that magnitude is small. Think about the trade-off is that we made 1 purchase, right? And then the cumulative average treatment effect is around 0.25. So it's smaller than the treatment itself. So it's just not cost efficient for the sellers to do this kind of intervention themselves to boost their future sales. Okay. Now we're going to put all these pieces together into a theory, and the theory is going to combine the search information friction, as well as then also allow us to talk about how does the number of sellers interact these frictions. Here, what we think about is that the consumers will face n sellers, capital N sellers. This can be a very, very big number, and then each seller will differ in terms of their intrinsic quality queue. The consumer will arrive sequentially at the platform, and each will conduct a fixed sample search. And sometimes we can also call that just form their awareness set, right? Which has like which would include a finite number K sellers when they were considering who to purchase from. Okay, the probability that they're going to sample each of these sellers will depend on this term V, which we now call the visibility function. Okay, and this visibility function will capture this demand reinforcement mechanism, meaning that the visibility function will depend on your initial visibility, as well as the total cumulative sales you have sold on this platform all the way up to time t. Okay, so the probability of sampling by each seller will depend on this relative visibility, which is how successful you have been in the past versus how successful your rivals have been in the past together on this platform. And you can also see here is that there is this relative visibility function features a congestion force, because on the denominator, all of your rivals' visibility will be there, and when the n gets larger, you are also facing more competition to enter into the consumer's search set, right? And the consumers then make their purchase decision within the search sample. Here's when we're building the information friction. When they face these varieties, they are not sure how good each of these varieties are, how good each of these sellers are. The qualities are not known ex ante, but only learn over time through the past purchase and the reviews. We normalize the common prior belief to be very much consistent with our data. Think about the quality of each of the seller to be just standard normal 0, 1. Okay, and the consumer who have purchased from seller I, they will leave a noisy review, which will be centered around the true quality, but this review could be noisy. Maybe just because consumer were lazy, they just put a star there. Maybe just the consumer are not, there's some idiosyncrasy. So this data T will capture how noisy this review is, right? And based on the standard Bayesian updating of the normal signal, for each of the seller, the posterior expected value of their quality will actually be in just a weighted average of their prior, which does have a mean of 0, as well as this ZT bar I, which the average review from all the previous purchases for this specific seller. Okay, and how confident you are about that will depend on the standard deviation of these reviews. Okay, so upon that's why the consumer just have to search for finite sets of these sellers, and he or she wasn't sure about the true quality, but only making decision relying on these posterior beliefs, and then finally they will make a discrete choice based on these qualities. Okay, so they are subject to some type 1 string value shocks, and then they will pick the one they believe will be the best one that entered their consideration. Okay, so at the end of the day, you can think about this eventual choice is going to be the probability G. So given the sample and the choice rule, we can define the purchase probability for each seller I, which depends on the size of the consumer's consideration set, which depends on relative visibility, right, and also the eventual purchase probability. And this PT plus 1 I essentially help us to characterize the evolution of the overall visibility function of each of these sellers. So by that, we can forward simulating our market and knowing how the market overall evolve over time. Okay. So now let me just state one of the most important theoretical results of our paper. So here we are going to state here is that given any set of parameters, including the size of the consumer's consideration set, the initial visibility of each of the seller, the magnitude of the demand reinforcement mechanism, as well as the noisiness of the review. For every positive integer period amount time t, within the finite time of t, there exists some number of sellers such that whenever you increase the number of sellers, the expected quality received by the consumers in all the periods, all the way up to this time t, will strictly decrease with the number of sellers n. Okay, so this is exactly what we're talking about at the early on, is that, in other words, the market allocation and the consumer welfare strictly gets worse in all these earlier periods as the number of sellers on the platform actually increases. Okay, so what are the intuition here? The intuition here is that when you have larger number of n, not surprisingly, it is going to dampen the positive impact of an additional order on a seller's relative visibility. That's basically dampen what we call demand reinforcement mechanism, right? And so it now takes longer for any of the high quality sellers to actually stand out. Okay, and on top of that, because of the existence of information frictions, when you reduce the number of orders and the reviews per seller, you also make it take much longer to resolve the information uncertainty. Okay, so that such that one consumer making their purchase decision, they sometimes make the wrong decision, right? So it takes longer to resolve this information uncertainty to discover the high quality sellers. Because these two forces interact with each other, that makes it particularly costly for a platform to have a very large number of sellers existing on this platform. Okay, so now given that we have this theoretical proof, we will now put And also because time limit, I'm not going to talk about long run market outcome. Let me just directly jump into the structural model to put all these pieces together and to quantify exactly the magnitude of this comparative static analysis, through the lens of our quantitative model. Okay, so the reason I spend quite a bit of time on the theoretical model is because our demand side will look very similar to the theoretical model. So on the search and the learning part of our model, we're going to follow basically the theoretical setup. And I just remind you, the key parameters will be the size of the consumer's consideration set, K, the initial visibility, V0, nu 0, the noisiness of the review, sigma, and also the strength of the demand reinforcement mechanism, lambda, right? But we do have to enrich the purchase stage of the consumers because they have to not only care about the posterior quality of each of the seller, but also the price charged by these sellers, right? So here we do have to take the price a little bit more seriously because in the theoretical model, we totally abstract from the price differences. And also we have to build in an outside option because consumer might actually come by to this platform and just leave without purchasing anything. Given these two slight extensions, on the cost side, we are going to make an assumption that the consumer will be having a cost that is positively correlated with their quality. The reason is because in the data, we do observe, even using our self-collected quality measure, we do see that the seller's price is actually having a slight increase, slight slope, positive slope when they will correlate that with the quality measures. So here, that's why we allow the correlation between the cost and the quality, and following a Gaussian copular with a dependent variable rho. So this is the additional structural parameter we're adding into the model. Although here we do abstract from a lot of complicated theoretical setting by assuming that this population correlation is unknown to both the buyer and the seller, such that the seller cannot use the price as additional signaling device. In terms of thinking about the pricing strategy, naturally, sometimes you might think about the sellers might have incentive to do the dynamic pricing because of demand reinforcement. Unfortunately, we do not find much evidence of that in our data. That's the reason we took a more empirical-driven approach, thinking about assigning an exogenous probability of adjusting the price after a certain period of time, and we're going to match that probability with the empirical frequency of the price adjustment we observe for our sellers in the data. But importantly, when they were setting their price, they do recognize that the consumer will face search friction and information frictions, that they will indulge in the fact that they will only be competing with a small subset in terms of the expected finite set of these rivals. Okay, and due to time limit, I'm not going to get into the details of this pricing strategy, but this is fairly similar to some of the early work. For instance, the work done by Michael. Okay, so given that, let me just briefly talk about what is going to be the identification argument for these four key structural parameters, which include the lambda, nu 0, sigma, and the rho. In fact, lambda and nu 0 are going to be identified jointly. They are going to be used to target the distribution of the cumulative market shares by our sellers in the children's t-shirt market, as well as the dependence of the new order on the cumulative orders each seller would have already had. Okay, so just to give an idea why that's the case, think about this nu 0, right? So the nu 0 is the initial visibility of each of these sellers. Okay, so if the nu 0 is very small, then we do know that the first order and the subsequent order is going to play a very important role, and that naturally you can think about here that will determine the dependence of the new order on the cumulative orders. That will make it more important. But also on top of that, once you make the subsequent also to actually become more important, that also means that the reinforcement channel becomes more powerful here. That will increase the market share distribution. on the market, right? So to kind of target the market share distribution, we can also use the additional parameter lambda to govern that relationship. So that's why these two moments jointly pin down the lambda and also nu zero. And on top of that, of course, as we already showed you, the noisy relationship between the quality, the true quality that we measured, and the cumulative market share of these sellers will govern how noisy these reviews are. If these reviews are not noisy at all, and the information were reviewed very, very quickly, then we will see a much cleaner connection between quality and the market share. The superstar firms turns out to be all the high quality firms, right? And finally, the coefficient of the log price on the measured quality will give us the relationship between the cost and the quality, which is relatively straightforward. We're going to use the method of simulated moments, simulate the market forward until the cumulative sales reach the amount of data, and we are going to just very much similar to the model to the data. We'll be thinking about around 10,000 seller listings. In total, we have 9 moments and 4 parameters, and as I explained, the within sample fit is actually pretty good. These parameters help us to match these 9 moments really well. Just to interpret briefly, what does this parameters mean? This combination of this lambda and the nu zero essentially means that the first order is actually very important. The first order improves your relative visibility by almost 5 times. And that actually gives us the explanatory power to explain why the going from 0 to 1 turns out to be really, really important, right? Just like in our data. And the sigma is estimated to be very noisy, such that the posterior uncertainty is reduced by only 3.3% after the first order. They also indicate that it takes a lot of orders for the true information to be reviewed on this specific platform. And what's mostly reassuring here is also remember that we didn't do anything to match the randomized control trial coefficient, right? So after we estimate the model, we also conduct the simulated randomized control trial ourselves. Basically, we randomly treat around 4% of the small seller listings on our simulated data, and then we simulate that forward to the average market share reach the real data. Okay, so the average market cumulative order increase the same amount as in the real data. And what we found is that despite not being targeted, we get an average treatment effect of around 0.13, which is also lie comfortably within the range of the randomized control trials reduced form coefficient. So that actually gives us some confidence now to think about the final counterfactual. And today, let me just focus on this key idea about thinking about reducing the number of sellers. Okay, so I'm going to tell you 2 cases. On one case, it's very simple. We're going to stick with the original baseline, but simply reduce the number of sellers, goes from 10,000, right, goes down to 5,000. Okay, as you can see here, yeah, I'm totally done by 2 minutes. So if you look at the first case, what you can see here is that the sales weighted quality in terms of purchase, as our theory predicted, despite we're a more complicated quantitative model, very much consistent with a theoretical model, the sales weighted quality actually increased substantially, right? So it goes from 0.08 all the way to 0.25, and the total share for the top 1/3 of the quality firms actually increased. And the consumer surplus increased also by close to 10%. A lot of that's being achieved by, let me just show you graphically, right? So this is the basic evolution of the expected quality of the chosen seller, right? So the blue dots on the baseline, where the orange dots are the counterfactual simulations. You can see basically here that the high quality firms, they stand out much faster, and alleviates they were able to just overcome the search and information frictions, and they start to obtain the purchases much earlier than the baseline case, right? So the second, more interesting, we also want to highlight the importance of the interaction between the search and the information frictions. How do we do that? So we conduct an additional case where we hypothetically set the review noise to be 0. Okay, that case means that once you obtain your first order, your information is reviewed completely. to all the rest of the future consumers. Okay, so the review can give you exactly the truth. Okay, in that case, what we find that when we reduce the number of sellers goes from 10,000 to 5,000, we can still improve, but the magnitude is way smaller, right? So you can think about we have some marginal improvement in terms of sales weighted quality, as well as the average consumer surplus, but the benefit is relatively limited. Okay, the reason is exactly because the once you get rid of the information friction, as long as the seller was able to sample once, right? They will be exactly validated to be a high quality seller, and they will be already overcoming all the future frictions, at least much easier than our baseline setting. Hopefully this also gives you an idea that it is really the interaction between the search and the information friction that plays a big role for our theoretical results as well as our empirical results here. Okay, so I'm going to jump over these final slides and just try to conclude. I think our paper study the export kind of dynamics and market evolution on the e-commerce. In terms of broad lesson, I want to emphasize here is that our study kind of draw a parallel like the classical work by Mankiw and Winston, right? In the Mankiw and Winston work, they really emphasize a lot of the product market competition and business stealing effect to think about entry. In our case, our focus is more on the search side, and we really thinking about the access end. There could be under the search and information friction that's very common to the global e-commerce market. There could also exist this kind of like phenomenon. In general, you can think about there'll be like access entry, right? So of course, the next stage of the study is to think about whether we can think about whether they're like useful policy interventions beyond the initial onboarding stage effort for the government is really important. Whether we can do some third-party certification, or can we do some further screening, and market segmentation will turns out to be very important for the efficient operation of this market and help us to identify the real high-quality seller and help them to grow. Okay, I'll just stop here. Thank you. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Daniel. And next we have Michael Dinnerstein with the discussion.
Great, thanks so much for having me. I'm very happy to discuss this paper. I like this paper a lot. I think I felt like the ingredients to the paper were really kind of much better than you usually see. We have a lot of papers that try to guess what quality is or kind of do some often creative thing. And here the creative thing they do is direct measurement. And I think that's a huge, there are not many papers that do this. I think it really makes the results much more credible. Second, they have the experimental variation, which is really nice, both for showing directly that the demand shock matters. And that's, I think, something that like those of us who've talked to these platforms and are aware of maybe not the coefficients on their search algorithm, but at least the inputs, it's not surprising that matters, but I haven't seen such direct evidence towards it. And then it also helps validate the model. And then they have really detailed data, which is also somewhat rare from the bigger platforms at this point, where even just like market shares measured without error is rather difficult. And so they have their conclusions, which you saw most of them. I think they're very credible and useful. Actually, the middle conclusion here, it was proposition 2, which Daniel didn't mention in the presentation, but I think it's a useful one to thinking about how much the platform should tilt search towards towards listings that had high past sales. And so you might want to tilt it a bit because those might be the best listings, but if you tilt too much, you might reward early luck. So I had a few things I was still curious about at the end of the paper. Not necessarily challenges to what they're doing, but kind of things I thought that would fill in the story. The first, I was trying to think about quality. It's measured at a point in time. Although so the first question is maybe there's some randomness to the quality of an individual product. So like just for projecting the quality of a future purchase from the same seller, the one you got may not be a great signal. In a footnote, they mentioned that they actually kind of for some sellers, it sounds like they got a second item later on, and it seems like there's pretty persistent quality. I was thinking a little bit also in terms of just like dividing up the quality in terms of when it's measured, in terms of the life cycle of the listing. You can imagine that take like the superstar. The superstar doesn't necessarily have the highest quality. The superstar is also selling a lot at that point. So if there's scale effects, say they're diseconomies of scale, then you might have thought that they rose for good reasons, but once they got there, they had trouble kind of maintaining the quality. And then they might also have incentive effects to reduce their quality at that point. So I thought that was kind of a useful thing to maybe fill in the interpretation of the cross-sectional facts. The second one is definitely a critique of my work as well, which is, and this I think is probably less relevant to them, but there are lots of benefits for empirical analysis to focus on a fairly homogeneous product category or variety where you can control for pretty much everything. And I think in that setting, you might think it's pretty clear that it's like kind of ripe for overentry. At least in my work on eBay, we did that as well, but there were other product categories where you thought perhaps like this platform design made some more sense in settings where there's just much more heterogeneity. So just kind of from a platform level, thinking about it would be, I was kind of just curious about, is this, the t-shirts, is it particularly homogeneous relative to the other stuff sold on AliExpress, or is it just a pretty homogeneous set of products generally? Next, I was curious about markups, the level of them, as well as the fixed costs, which I think are pinned down by a free entry model. I was also interested by how the level of markups vary with quality, which I'll get to on the next slide. And then finally, I think that they're convincing that they don't need to have tons going on in the supply side because they just don't see much, say, price changing. I was just kind of curious whether there would be large gains from dynamic pricing, maybe at the estimated parameters. And then finally, I thought I'd end with just thinking about platform policies. Actually, Daniel's last bullet point in his conclusion mentioned a few, and I have a few different, sort of different ones that I had thought of. First, often these, I think that probably the model's algorithm that they use to predict what will be searched is probably a slight oversimplification, being just V plus past sales. A lot of platforms definitely incorporate feedback information, although I think it's probably usually ratings and not the actual reviews. But that might kind of, your analysis might show that there might be benefit to changing the algorithm in that way. And then finally, I was thinking about how do we achieve lower N? So you might raise entry costs, like having a listing fee. But I thought there would be some, and this is the part I kind of care the most about adding to the paper, which is thinking about how that would differentially affect high versus low quality sellers. So you have this row being positive means that the highest cost sellers are also the highest quality. So they might be particularly crowded out with a listing fee. That said, they also have slightly higher prices. So I couldn't actually figure out if their markups were higher or lower, or their fixed costs. So I thought that would be kind of an interesting thing to think about.
Great. Maybe Daniel, take a few minutes to respond to Michael, and then we can open up the floor for more questions.
Okay, yeah, thanks so much for all these great comments, Michael. Yeah, I think a lot of them are pretty well taken. You know, we're also trying to, we think the quality is very central to our study. So we're definitely collecting also more data. You know, in our appendix, we mentioned a few cases where we're actually conducting some additional collection of quality data from a few more product categories in particular. But I think your point about how the quality related to scale and life cycle are definitely great points that we should focus a little bit more on, and then we could do more homework there. The markup is definitely also something that we originally wonder a lot about. You know, right now we only have like what our model would imply. You know, I can tell you a magnitude, a model from our model perspectives. You know, it seems reasonable. It's going from like, you know, 1.2, 1.25, so it's kind of in the reasonable range. Data, honestly, we don't have too much idea because we do not really observe cost. So that's that is the kind of model perspective. But also the dynamic pricing point is a great one. You know, yeah, despite the empirically, maybe we can adopt this kind of pricing strategy. Maybe we should also calculate, you know, what the best they could do and how much do they lose. And I can totally see that. Your final question, actually, if you don't mind, maybe I can show one more slides because I think this is very, very related to what Michael was talking about. There was actually one thing we were doing here, you know, which I kind of skipped because it is a little bit too much detailed. Here, basically, what we're trying to do is to say, just exactly as what Michael was saying, we're trying to think about reduce the number of sellers, and we were trying to conduct something about like a market segmentation. The market segmentation meaning that we will be trying to use both information from here. This is the more sophisticated because we will be trying to use information both coming from the cumulative sales as well as the review, and the horizontal axis basically telling us when you will need to use the review information. At the very beginning, we can actually screen out the sellers randomly because you have already not observed anything. In some way, you are really just doing random screening because there's no review information at all. And in the middle, you start to accumulate purchase records. That's why you start to see reviews, and that can be used. But you don't want to use that too late. If you use the review information too late to create this premium segment, then you are hurting really all the previous customers. So in the paper we do discuss such a kind of like Michael, I hope address some of your question, but maybe let me know. We can exchange emails because time limited. If it were not, because here, I think the timing of the introducing this market segmentation based on both review and also cumulative sales information does actually help us to kind of screen out some of the high quality sellers, and that's something that we could do potentially to kind of implementable. Okay, that's one specific direction we were actually thinking and could potentially explore more.